This is CBN NewsWatch.
Thanks for joining us for this special election edition of CBN NewsWatch. I'm Charlene Aaron. We're going to look at the results and reaction here in the U.S. and in Israel and the Middle East, along with a key government shakeup in Israel. Here at home, former President Donald Trump is set to become president once again after winning more than 270 electoral votes and apparently the popular vote in Tuesday's elections. Big wins in Georgia and North Carolina gave early indication that the Trump campaign was headed to victory. CBN's Jennifer Wishon brings us our report.
In a show of electoral might, Donald Trump has become the first president to win a non-consecutive race for the White House since Grover Cleveland did it more than 130 years ago. Trump's path to victory was blazoned by a trail that flipped nearly all the coveted swing states. For MAGA faithful, it was a night of redemption. Joined by his wife Melania and his children, Trump stepped out to claim victory in the early hours of the morning.
Frankly, this was, I believe, the greatest political movement of all time. There's never been anything like this in this country.
He renewed his promises on the economy, immigration, and what he calls common sense leadership.
This will truly be the golden age of America. That's what we have to have.
Now he'll get to work forming his cabinet, along with Vice President J.D. Vance. A man with his own inspiring personal comeback story.
I think that we just witnessed the greatest political comeback in the history of the United States of America.
And he pulled off something that's eluded Republicans for 20 years. Along with the Electoral College, Donald Trump is poised to win the popular vote. Kamala Harris is expected to speak later today. Despite making abortion the cornerstone of her campaign, women voters didn't turn out for her in the droves some expected. Trump won white women by 52%. He also won Latino men and white men. Christian voters also made a difference. Trump won 62% of the Protestant vote and 56% of the Catholic vote. Now comes the hard part of governing. He'll inherit an economy a majority of Americans say isn't working for them, along with 2 wars and mounting tensions with America's foes.
He's going to have to worry about not upsetting the U.S.-China relationship so much that the economic costs spill over into the security realm.
And reuniting the bitterly divided country.
I think what we have tonight is a red, white, and blue wave in this country. Because what we need in the United States of America is leaders in Washington, D.C. that actually put the interests of American citizens above all else.
And with Republican Bernie Moreno's Senate win in Ohio and Jim Justice's win in West Virginia, President-elect Trump will enjoy a Republican majority in the U.S. Senate.
We need the Republican Party to start solving the problems of this country, and we have a significant number of problems.
Dozens of House races across the country have yet to be called, but Speaker Mike Johnson, who won his bid for re-election in Louisiana, says he's confident the GOP will retain its majority.
So look, it's too early to call everything, but we're very optimistic. I mean, it looks good. I've been in the war room. I'm calling the candidates as they're calling the races.
Republican control over the White House and Congress would give the GOP a big boost in passing its agenda.
Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason. And that reason was to save our country and to restore America to greatness. And now we are going to fulfill that mission together.
Still, many Christian leaders say followers of Jesus have an important responsibility as the nation works to move forward.
And so we're trying to show people a way to say, hey, regardless if you're a Democrat or a Republican, especially as a Christian, you have to be civil, you have to be constructive, and you have to be looking to help your neighbor. And that should be the focus.
As Christians, let's try to reconcile and move people closer together and move them forward for the better of everyone in this country.
And some leaders say it's okay for Christians to see themselves as outsiders, as Jesus calls us to be.
And when we recognize that we don't have to fit into our current cultural system, we can then engage our community, our culture, not out of anger or by complying to it, but instead in love.
President-elect Trump says he believes success is what will bring the country back together. When he starts implementing his agenda and the country has some wins, he believes the nation will begin to heal. Jennifer Wishon, CBN News, Washington.
Our chief political analyst, David Brody, is here with us after a very long election night. David, it looks like President Trump swept all of these key battleground states, and how was he able to do this as well as the popular vote?
Yeah, it was a nickel and dime approach, Shirley. And what I mean by that is just a little bit here, a little bit there in all different sorts of states. He's going to probably end up getting 312 electoral votes. And I brought the list. Charlene, I've got a list. It's not a grocery list, but it's a list of what Donald Trump did last night. Look at this. I mean, on male voters, he was 3 points better. Female voters, 2 points better. I'm talking about from 2020 to 2024. It goes on. Hispanic voters, 13 points better. Evangelicals, he was 5 points better. And now I should put on my glasses again. Suburban voters, 2 points better. Catholic vote was 13 points better. It goes on and on. Independents, Gen Z, union households. I'm not saying he won all of these, but he was better than his 2020 vote count, and that made all the difference in the world.
How big of a deal was the evangelical vote, David?
I mean, it was huge. I mean, we hear so much about evangelicals have to get out and vote. Well, they did, especially in places like North Carolina and Georgia. And it's also conservative Catholics as well up in the Rust Belt. In Pennsylvania and Wisconsin and Michigan. Michigan's not fully in yet, but that should come in soon. So it was a huge deal that he was able to get that type of support. But here's the thing, Charlene, it went even beyond evangelicals. It really was a mandate in so many different groups and subsets. I
mean, you're talking minority voters who voted for Trump big. I mean, how much of a role, did that play? It's huge.
Well, it's huge. What we're seeing and what we saw last night is a total change in the way politics is operating, the way the coalition has been formed. Democrats were able to rely back in the Obama days, black voters, Hispanic voters, the rural blue-collar voters. That's all been blown to smithereens, as they say. Donald Trump has come along. Actually, Donald Trump was down. You want to know one group he was down with? White voters.
Wow.
So he was down 3 points with white voters, but he was up with black voters, Hispanic voters. Everything's changed, and that should send some serious warning signs to the Democrats to say, hey, this isn't about Trump. It's what Trump is representing, and he's speaking to a lot of different Americans.
Wow. Well, the Republicans, we know, have taken back the Senate and may even win more seats once the votes are all counted. What about the House?
Well, the House is up for grabs. Republicans feeling confident this morning that they're going to take it. It might take a couple of days to sort out. There's a lot of races on the West Coast out in California. They think they're going to win the House. They've obviously already won the Senate, and they could have up to 56, potentially, up to 56 senators. This is insane. I mean, this hasn't happened in more than a century. 56, possibly. 56 Republican senators to 44 Democrat senators, or 44 that caucus with the Democrats. That would give Trump a mandate. Don't forget the popular vote, which we haven't talked about here, but that's another thing. Donald Trump won the popular vote. Will it be by 1 million, 2 million, 5 million, somewhere in there?
Unbelievable.
When all is said and done, it's a mandate on all levels.
With him having a mandate, what kind of governing agenda do you expect him to have?
Well, the first thing he's going to do is he's going to extend those tax cuts that were his tax cuts to begin with, that they passed during his first term as 45. They'll come back as 47, now extend them. But beyond that, I think what you're going to see is you're going to see aid to Ukraine stop. I think that's what you're going to see. And the reason that's going to stop is because, as Trump says, I can make a deal, or give me 48 hours and I'll make a deal. But I believe he's going to try and somehow help end that Russia-Ukraine war. Therefore, no more American taxpayer dollars will be needed in Ukraine. As for Israel, he'll be right there alongside. That money's not going to dry up anytime soon.
Kamala Harris has to come out and concede.
Yeah, she does. She didn't do it last night, which I know to some folks was disappointing. I mean, the writing was on the wall. She'll do it this morning. It's a tough loss, personally for her. But let's be honest. This is a well, shall we say it on CBN, a come to Jesus moment, if you will, for the Democrat Party. They need to figure out what the road ahead is. And that road ahead has to start with common sense and appealing to just your everyday voter. You know, this idea of what is a woman and a lot of the transgender surgeries and the wokeness and all that. Look, it's square peg, round hole, and they're missing the voters, and Trump is tapping into that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
David, Brody, thank you for your analysis and for staying up so late.
Can I go to sleep now?
You can go to sleep now.
All right, I'll just take go ahead, carry on with the show, Shirley. Just kidding.
Thank you so much for your insights. God bless you. Well, coming up, we take you to Israel for the reaction to the U.S. election and hear about a very important shakeup in the Israeli government. That's when we come back.
Introducing a brand new way to start your morning, the CBN News Quick Start Podcast. Each weekday morning at 7 a.m., get quick highlights of the day's important news. Then an in-depth analysis that goes beyond the headlines. Insights that matter to people of faith. Discover how God is moving around the world and here at home. Find the CBN News Quick Start Podcast on iTunes or wherever you enjoy listening to podcasts, because truth matters.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu became one of the first global leaders to congratulate President Trump on his election victory. And as Chris Mitchell reports from Jerusalem, Netanyahu also surprised his own country by shaking up his security cabinet, even as Israel is fighting a war on multiple fronts.
Netanyahu called the U.S. election a huge victory for President Trump and a, quote, powerful recommitment to the great alliance between Israel and America. Trump's win reunites two leaders who worked together on the Abraham Accords and not opposing Iran's expansion throughout the Middle East in Trump's first term. Appearing on CBN's election night coverage, author and Middle East analyst Joel Rosenberg said Israelis favored Trump by nearly 50 points in a recent poll.
A 50-point gap in favor of Donald Trump tells you that Israelis believe that Donald Trump will be better for Israel, that we will be safer, that he will have our back.
On the U.S. election day, Netanyahu took a major step by firing his defense minister, Yoav Gallant. In a speech to the nation, Netanyahu said the trust between him and Gallant had broken down over the past few months.
Significant gaps were discovered between me and Gallant in the management of the military campaign, and these gaps were accompanied by statements and actions that contradict the decisions of the government and the decisions of the cabinet.
After his dismissal, Gallant said he disagreed with Netanyahu on three main issues: a military draft for ultra-Orthodox men, how to resolve the hostage issue, and a commission to determine what went wrong on October 7th. He ended with a salute.
To the wounded and the disabled, to the hostages and their families, and to the IDF fighters, I trust you and I salute you.
Netanyahu replaced Gallant with Foreign Minister Israel Katz.
Israel Katz has already proven his abilities and his contribution to national security, also as foreign minister, as finance minister, as intelligence minister for 5 years.
Former opposition member Gideon Sa'ar will become the new foreign minister.
And Chris Mitchell joins us now from Jerusalem. Chris, how is the Israeli public reacting to Trump's win?
Well, some of them, Charlene, on television are actually praying. One of the Israeli pundits did that on one of the networks last night. 66% of Israelis supported Trump in a poll last week, so they're very excited about what happened yesterday. It's going to directly impact Israel, as you said in the intro, in the middle of a war. And the election really presented two diametrically opposed policies toward Israel and the Middle East. Israelis here remember what Trump did in his first term from 2016 to 2020. Not only the Abraham Accords we mentioned in the report, but he recognized Jerusalem as the capital of the Jewish people. He moved the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. He recognized the Golan Heights as Israeli sovereign territory. And also there were big differences on his policies towards Iran as the potential policies of Kamala Harris, which would be a continuation of the Biden administration. Their policy was more appeasement towards Iran. They'd ease some of the sanctions, really giving the Islamic regime billions of dollars, as opposed to what Trump did in his first term, what was called maximum pressure. And they really squeezed Iran economically, also potentially advancing the Abraham Accords in the next term. Also, normalization with Saudi Arabia. And most importantly, I think for Israelis now, the U.S. standing with them strongly during their time of war, something many Israelis feel the Biden administration really did not do since October 7th, but merely kind of many times opposing the Netanyahu government.
Well, we know that Prime Minister Netanyahu has praised Trump's victory as well. Trump has said that he wants to see an end to the war in Gaza. How soon is that likely to happen?
Charlene, it's kind of hard to predict exactly when that's going to happen, but the goals of the war had been to defeat Hamas and also prevent them from ever governing the Gaza Strip again. They've made significant strides in this. They have killed the leader of Hamas, Yahya Sinwar. They've destroyed most of Hamas's military brigades. Right now, there's more of an insurgency coming against IDF soldiers. But when this is all going to end, many people are praying it'll be soon, but not sure exactly when that time will come.
And Chris, what is the thinking about how Iran will look at Trump's victory?
Well, Charlene, I think this is kind of like the worst case scenario for Tehran. As I mentioned, Trump had a maximum pressure campaign during his last term. They had cut Iran's oil production by sometimes more than 80%. The currency of the rial fell in its value, and actually it fell after yesterday's election results came. He financially isolated them. He reduced the funding of Hamas and Hezbollah because of that economic isolation. And so I think they're very, very scared about what happened yesterday. But also, Charlene, from today to January 20th is a really dangerous time. Many people wonder, could Iran race to a nuclear weapon right now? Could the U.S. and Israel attack Iran's nuclear facilities? So it's a very critical time period right now, really a time people should be praying about what's going on here.
Absolutely. And what about Arab countries like Saudi Arabia? What's their reaction?
Well, I think they're pretty celebrating as well. Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, he congratulated President Trump. I think they welcome the results. We mentioned the Abraham Accords. I think that many people are going to see that expand. They see Trump, these Arab nations, see them as an ally against Iran. Iran is a mortal enemy of many of these Gulf countries, and so I think they're celebrating this. As I said, the Biden White House really appeased Iran to a large extent. And some people wonder, could this lead, as I mentioned, to normalization between Israel and Saudi Arabia? I think in the wider Middle East, I think this is welcomed by some in Lebanon, the other Gulf countries, the UAE and Bahrain. And what this does, Charlene, it really does change the geopolitics of the whole Middle East. And I mean, a lot of people right now are going to see the chessboard over here shift in many, many ways.
Well, real quickly, Chris, let's turn to Netanyahu's firing of his defense minister, Gallant. Why did he do that? And will having a new defense minister change Israel's war strategy?
I'm not sure the war strategy is going to change. And I think the reason for the firing is that there was a difference of approaches between Netanyahu and Gallant. He almost did it in March of 2023. They really disagreed on important matters of the war. And also, many people felt, and Netanyahu as well, this is part of his rationale for this, is that Gallant was really going behind Netanyahu's back with the Biden administration, a relationship that really wasn't sustainable. They had different approaches to dealing with drafting the ultra-Orthodox. And the scripture that comes to my mind, Charlene, is how can two walk together unless they be agreed? So Netanyahu believes that this was something that he had to do. And the timing was interesting, too. I think he felt like with the Trump administration, he would have a little more wind behind his sails to go ahead and do this at this time.
Absolutely. Much to pray about. Chris Mitchell, thank you so much for your time and for your insights.
Thanks, Shirley.
Still ahead, in addition to the national elections, voters across the country also cast ballots on state constitutional amendments on abortion rights. We'll bring you an update right after this. Americans across the country voted on state constitutional amendments protecting abortion. Those amendments passed in Arizona, Missouri, and Colorado, while Florida, Nebraska, and South Dakota voted them down. Kristen Hawkins of Students for Life told CBN News that the Florida measure would have allowed an abortion through the third trimester.
If this would have passed in Florida, a woman could have said her mental health would be at risk for giving birth or having a child, and it would have justified abortion even in the 9th month of pregnancy. So it's a massive win. Thanks to the pro-life movement, thanks to Governor DeSantis, that we defeated Amendment 4 in Florida.
New York and Maryland also passed measures supporting abortion. Well, coming up, another example of how God is moving on college campuses and bringing young people into salvation. We'll have that story for you when we come back.
Download the CBN News app, 24/7 news from a Christian perspective at home or on the road. One place for all of your news. Breaking news alerts. Set daily prayer goals and pray for news stories. Read the most important news and watch CBN News Channel live. CBN News, because truth matters. Go to cbnnewsapp.com to get the app today.
God is still moving among young people on college campuses. At Texas A&M University last week, more than 10,000 students packed into Reed Arena, and hundreds rushed to the altar to give their lives to Jesus Christ. This event came as Unite Us, a college campus evangelistic movement, closed out its fall semester tour. The group's gatherings have been marked by salvations, worship, and water baptisms in multiple states. And that is going to do it for this edition of CBN News Watch. Remember, you can find more of our news programs on the CBN News channel anytime or online with cbnnews.com. Also, tell us what you think about the stories you've seen by emailing newswatch@cbn.com or talk to us on Facebook, Instagram, and X, which is formerly known as Twitter. We hope you'll join us next time. Have a great day, and may God bless you.